Welcome to Caregiver Cast with Mary Elaine. Are you overwhelmed raising a family, working full-time, caring for a parent or grandparent? It can be challenging when you're doing it alone. Caregiver Cast helps busy, burned-out professionals reduce their stress and overwhelm to create a better caregiving experience for themselves and their loved one. Caregiver Cast brings caregivers together with experts who provide information in a variety of areas. In each episode, you'll get tips on topics such as finance, legal, medical, self-care, community resources, mindset, and more. We're here to make your caregiving journey a more rewarding one. Acquire the confidence and skills to be a more capable caregiver by implementing the resources and strategies from these expert thought leaders. Get a community of support, resources, and strategies for your caregiving journey inside the Caregiver Lifeline community. Visit caregiverlifelinecommunity.com. And now here's your host, Mary Elaine.
Hi, welcome to the Caregiver Lifeline Summit. My special guest today is Mel Mason, who will be discussing cluttering, decluttering our lives so that would improve our mental health. Before I formally introduce Mel, I am going to just give you some information about her. So Mel is an 8-time best-selling author who is the clutter expert, and as a sexual abuse survivor, she grew up depressed, suicidal, and surrounded by clutter. What she realized after coming back from the brink of despair and getting through her own chaos was that the inside is just a mirror of the inside. And if you only address the outside without changing the inside, the clutter keeps coming back. That set her on a mission to empower people around the world to get free from clutter inside and out so they can thrive and experience happiness and abundance in every area of their lives. Welcome to the Caregiver Lifeline Summit, Mel.
Thanks so much for having me, Mary Elaine. It's so good to see you.
Most definitely. So thank you for sharing your story. It sounds like a terrible thing to overcome, which you have, and I really appreciate that. So how did you become known as the clutter expert?
Well, first, thanks so much for having me. It's always an honor to be able to share my experience because my belief is that what I went through can only help others if it's shared. And so it wasn't so much terrible. Life happens. We all experience trauma and loss in our lives. It's what we choose to do with those experiences, whether they tear us down or they build us up. And so being able to persevere and triumph over those challenges and be able to share my experience with others and provide hope is what I'm all about and is my mission on the planet. So thank you for the opportunity. The Clutter Expert. Yes, I did not get that name by accident. I was the cluttered, messy kid. You could not walk in my room. My entire floor was covered with stuff. And it wasn't just stuff that I didn't feel like putting away and cleaning up after myself. Like I was fine having trash on the floor. So I was fine living in filth. You literally couldn't walk from my door anywhere in my room without taking your own life in your hands. It was, you'd trip on something, you'd fall, you'd break your neck. But what I didn't realize at the time is that the outside is simply just a mirror of the inside. And already at such a young age, I was what I call littered with clutter on the inside. I was full of repressed emotions from traumas and losses. I was full of resentments, fears, the limiting beliefs and programming that we take on from 0 to 8 from our caregivers because we don't discern anything. We just believe everything is truth. And so I was littered with all of that clutter already. Okay. And I experienced a lot of trauma and loss that led up to that accumulation. My parents separated when I was 4 years old. I experienced 3 different sexual traumas from 3 different perpetrators at the age of 8 years old.
Oh my God.
And then by the age of 15 years old, one of those perpetrators happened to be my brother, my older brother. He was 5 years older than me. And he was one of my perpetrators. And when I was 15 years old, I got up the courage to actually confront him and tell him that what he did had an effect on me. And the very next day, I went to his house to collect my belongings. I had been living with him. That's a whole other story for another interview. But I went to his house to collect my belongings. And that's when I discovered his body. He had committed suicide.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And his suicide note said, "I'm sorry," but he also left his entire belongings to me, a 15-year-old who was already a cluttered mess. So what that meant for me was that after his body was removed, I got to then go back into his apartment and go through everything that he had to decide what I was keeping, what other people could have, what I was letting go of. And so if you're out there and you've got those sentimental items that you're hanging on to because someone's passed in your life, I've been there. I get you. I
Mm.
absolutely get you.
Hmm.
And so that almost became the nail in my coffin because already before my brother committed suicide, like I really didn't give a care about living or dying. Like I wasn't wanting to be on the planet anymore. And so I actually had planned to commit suicide exactly the way my brother did. I wanted to get off the planet. But fortunately for me, my school that I was in my sophomore year, a month after he committed suicide, said to me, "You are a danger to yourself and others, and you can't come back to get intensive therapy." I guess I don't remember what happened, but my family says I jumped off a balcony at school or something. I don't really remember.
Mm.
But they considered me a danger to myself, and they said, "You need to go get intensive therapy." And so I went and spent the next year and a half of my life living in an institution, in a residential treatment center for adolescents, where we lived in a house and then we
Mm.
walked up a little walkway to another building, and then we went to school. So we didn't really leave campus unless you got up the right level and you got some privileges where you could go out on a pass. But for a year and a half, I lived like that.
Mm.
And
Mm.
the best part about that experience was while I was living there, I was introduced to yoga and mindfulness. And ultimately, what that taught me was how to be present for all of my inner clutter, how to become willing to look at all of the inner clutter that had accumulated. And I didn't know that was what was happening in the process. It was when I
Mhm.
kind of looked back and I was like, oh, how did this happen? But it was because I became willing to look. And then what happened for me, which like blows my mind to this day, and especially when I see the results of my clients from doing what I teach them, I wasn't trying to get organized. I wasn't even trying to stay on the planet, remember? Like I didn't even have
Mm.
a will to live. And so becoming willing to look first gave me my will to live back and my desire to share my experience with others.
Mhm.
But the other thing that happened, what I say like by accident, was I just spontaneously and effortlessly started creating order in my room. Like I went from
Oh.
this cluttered, messy kid to someone who could no longer tolerate. Everything needed to have a place and be in its place. And that
Mhm.
only took about a year's time for me to go from that cluttered mess to creating order out of my chaos. And so, for those of you out there that are frustrated, that are overwhelmed, that feel like you have to drag yourself to get organized, just imagine if it could be effortless, if it could be
Mm.
easy, spontaneous, and fun. Like that's what happened for me. And so that really just set me on a mission to empower people around the world to get free from clutter because that is your birthright. You don't
Yeah.
have to live like this anymore.
I need to talk with you more after this. I'm messy and nuts and cluttered. Okay. So what do you mean when you say the outside is only a mirror of the inside? I love that expression.
Yeah, I love that question. So we know that there's a law in the universe called gravity, right? Might
Yes.
not agree with it, might not like it, but if I jump off a building, I'm not going to fly. I'm going to go splat, right? So there's another law in operation in the universe. It's called the principle of correspondence. And it states, as above, so below,
Oh.
or as within, so without. That's why you often hear, oh, if you're pointing a finger at somebody else, you got four fingers pointing back at yourself.
Yes.
You can't spot something in someone else if you don't already got it in yourself. And that actually goes for compliments as well. So when you see someone and you're like, oh my God, she's so amazing, she's so talented, she's so driven, you can't spot it in them if it's not already in you. So it works both ways, not just with pointing out like, oh, she's such a jerk, or she's a flake, or whatever it might be, right? And so the outside is only reflecting us back to us, because as humans, we can't see ourselves. And so we need a reflection back to ourselves. And so clutter accumulates for one simple reason. When you boil it down and keep it simple, because that's what I like to do, I like to remove all the clutter. When you boil it down, it's one reason. It's an unwillingness to look at it. You're just like, no, don't want to see you, don't want to deal with you, don't want to address you. I'm just going to leave you there, right?
Yes.
And so if the outside is a mirror of the inside, all that really means is an unwillingness to look within. It's an unwillingness to be present with yourself. That's it.
Oh my goodness, that is so profound, Mel. Say that one more time.
Yeah, so being unwilling to look at what's happening outside, addressing your clutter, just means you're unwilling to look within. It's that super simple. And I wouldn't have realized it if I didn't become willing to look at myself and not be trying to get organized. Like, I didn't give a rat's ass about getting organized. I wasn't like my clients coming to me, oh, I need help, I feel overwhelmed, I don't know where to start. Like, I get organized. And this happened by accident. So when I first launched my business 9 years ago now, I was like, organized by accident. That was kind of my tagline, because it happened accidentally. I wasn't trying. But what I found through years and years of coaching and working with people is that there's one simple thing that you need to do. Be willing to be present for your own experience. Be willing to look within. Now, you don't have to go digging up any hairy traumas. You don't have to go excavating or looking for anything. You actually just become willing to look at what's happening in the moment, right here, right now. And being present and accepting whatever is in the moment. And it's the willingness that makes the space. And because the outside is a mirror of the inside, if you make space inside, then the outside has to match. It's a law like gravity. So space starts to open up outside, whether it be you looking at your physical clutter, you clearing up your schedule and prioritizing yourself more and saying no to things that you would normally say yes to, opening the flow to financial abundance, not spending time with those people that aren't so healthy for you, changing what you consume with your mouth and start releasing weight. It's going to create space in every area of your life.
That is so profound, because if you can only figure out how to make that space to look within, your clutter, would you say, will disappear?
The clutter goes away, and it's the secret to actually keeping it from coming back. So many people will work from the outside in. Oh, I'll clear off this surface, I'll clean up my closet, I'll get the garage so I can park the car in it. But what inevitably happens?
It gets messy again.
Right, because you're working from the outside in. But when you start from the inside out, what starts to happen is literally by being willing to look. So for those of you that like to know how things work and are analyzers, right? So clutter, let's just say that's a lower frequency vibration. And we know that everything is energy, everything vibrates. That's like known fact now, right? If you don't go look that up, we don't have time to dive into that today, right? The willingness to look is a higher vibration. Okay. And we know from math that a positive and a negative cancel each other out.
Correct. Yes.
So when you take a high frequency of willingness and become willing to look at the low frequency inner clutter, you start to cancel it out and make space inside. And so what that does is it begins to raise your overall vibration, because right now you're a vibrational match to your surroundings because they are the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you begin to make this space, you gradually raise your vibration, and eventually the gap gets big enough between your vibration and that of the inner clutter that it causes you to spontaneously act. And a lot of my clients find that they do it unconsciously. They just find themselves cleaning out a junk drawer, or they find themselves driving to the storage unit and starting to go through stuff, not planning it, which is the most powerful thing.
Thank you for that explanation. That is really powerful. I sometimes just clean just for the matter of getting it done, not necessarily thinking about it. However, I still need to address what's in the inside. So thank you for bringing that up. And when we hear the word clutter, Mel, we think of stuff piling up, drawers overflowing, but that's just one of the ways that clutter manifests. We would agree with that. So what are other manifestations of clutter?
Yeah, absolutely. So I alluded to it a little bit, but you know, it's your birthright to thrive in every area of your life. And it's my belief that clutter is anything that gets in the way of that. And so there's many different manifestations of clutter. The first thing you think about is, yeah, the stuff, right? The physical stuff showing up. But it
Mhm.
also shows up as being overweight, carrying those excess pounds in your body. Common one is, I'm too busy. I don't have enough time. That's clutter. That's overwhelm. Being in
Mm.
relationships that are unhealthy, toxic relationships, that's clutter. Not having enough money, having a blocked financial flow, like the flow of abundance isn't coming in, that's a manifestation of clutter. Dealing with addiction, whether it
Mm.
be to drugs, alcohol, social media, food, gambling,
Wow.
whatever your addiction is, that's just a manifestation of clutter because it's all avoidance. It's all don't want to look, don't want to look, you want to
Right.
avoid.
Okay.
So here's the most powerful thing about what I teach. When you become willing to look,
Hmm.
every area of your life gets better. So for those of you that don't know, and I don't have time to dive into it, but I was a crack cocaine addict at 18. I was a crystal meth addict and homeless in my 20s. I was overweight, almost
Wow.
170 pounds, unhealthy. I was in a toxic relationship for 12 years. I had over $50,000 in debt. I've had almost every single manifest. Oh, I had the not enough time, not scheduling me, not putting myself first. I've had every single manifestation of clutter that you can imagine. And I've overcome it with the one thing that I teach my clients: how to be willing to look.
Wow. That is, thank you so much for sharing your powerful story, Mel. Um, this makes it seem, well, not really easy, but just how much you had to go through in order to get to this place. And I really appreciate that. So that's amazing that all of our addictions can be addressed as clutter. And that's also very powerful. So why is it that when we clear a surface or clean out a closet, the clutter always comes back? And that's my problem. I clean and then it gets messy 5 seconds later. Okay.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Because you're just going from the outside in. You're putting a band-aid on the problem by going from the
Okay.
outside in rather than the inside out. When you go from the inside out, it will happen in its own time, perfectly for you, and it will happen spontaneously and effortlessly. And how many people would like to have fun doing it? How
Yes,
many people would
fun,
love for it to
fun.
feel easy and effortless and not like trying to get molasses to go uphill in the middle of freaking January, right?
Exactly.
That's
Oh, I love it.
possible. That's so
Mm.
possible when you start from the inside out. Most of my clients are seniors who are really wanting to thrive in their golden years, and they have all of this clutter weighing down on them, and they're so weighed down and overwhelmed. But when they start working with me, all these years of not being able to keep your word, all these years of saying you're going to do something and not doing it, and not being able to stay consistent and get the momentum, when they take the coaching and they do what I suggest, they get results.
Okay, I'm signing up for your class. I mean, I really want things to be organized and neat and not so cluttered around my house. Like I said, it's fine for 5 seconds and then it's the same thing over again. So I need to definitely do some inner work.
Well, let's have a conversation. Most
Most
definitely.
definitely. So what's a simple tip to get started without feeling frustrated and overwhelmed?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, become willing to be present and willing to look at your own experience. It's literally
Mhm.
just stopping. You don't have to do any digging. For those of you that can't meditate, you don't have to meditate. It's not quieting your mind down. It's just closing your eyes and being willing to witness what's happening in the moment. So
Mhm.
you have physical sensations. So maybe you're feeling your sit bones in the chair right now, your feet on the floor. You have emotions that come up. You have thoughts that you think. You have sounds that you hear. You have smells that you smell, and if your eyes are open, you're going to see things. So, whatever's showing up in the moment that wants your attention, give yourself permission to acknowledge it. I liken it to the game Whack a Mole, you know, the arcade game where the moles pop up and you got
Yes.
a little mallet, you got to bop it on the head. So,
Mhm.
instead of focusing your mind and keeping your mind like on your breathing, and if your mind wanders, bringing it back, it's like, no, what wants your attention right now? Oh, this thought, this a feeling, this sensation, whatever. Oh, there's a plane going overhead. Well, my neighbor's dog is barking. Oh, that smells really good. Who's cooking down the hall? Or
Mhm.
whatever's showing up in the moment, be willing to look and just be willing to acknowledge it and allow it without needing to change it. Right. So that's the first
Okay.
thing. And then when addressing the physical clutter, most people have a tendency, oh, I'm going to clean up my closet today. And they rip the entire closet out and throw it in a huge pile on the bed. And just looking at that, sorry, Marie Kondo, just looking at that huge pile is overwhelming. And it can
Yes.
cause people to just like, oh, screw this. And then they like might start and make a decision about a couple things, but not seeing any progress. Like, this isn't going anywhere. They'll just
Mhm.
shove it all back in and it's worse than when you started. So
Right.
I always start with the square foot method, like nothing bigger than a square foot. Just address one small square foot at a time, get through what's in that square foot, then you'll have a square foot of space, then move on to the next square foot. So starting small and manageable. And my strategy for when tackling a room, this is my personal strategy, is I like to clear whatever's on the floor first. So systematically go around the floor, square foot by square foot. So you can walk in, you have the floor. Then you deal with all the visible surfaces so that you're getting the most bang for your buck. You're getting
Okay.
that visible. It's like you walk in, oh, that's clear. It feels good,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Then you address what's in the doors and in the drawers, because that's the non-visible stuff. So get the most bang for your buck, clear the floor first, then the surfaces, then what's in the drawers and drawers, but all one square foot at a time.
Great advice. Great advice. Wow. A lot for our listeners and for myself to think about in terms of decluttering um, our mental and physical space. So it's my understanding, Mel, that you have a free offer for our listeners today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not about giving clutter. I wrote a book called Freedom from Clutter, the guaranteed foolproof step-by-step process to remove the stuff that's weighing you down. If you want
Mhm.
the physical book, you can buy it on Amazon, but I'm going to give you the whole thing for free, not just a chapter. Just go to
Wow.
freegiftfrommel.com, put your name and email address in, and download my book. You can read the whole thing for free. But the best part about that is it's going to add you to my mailing list. And I am constantly offering free workshops and challenges to my community to support you and give you the tools that you need to get the results that you really want in your life. So stay on my mailing list, whitelist my email address, and then get notified of all the upcoming workshops that I'll be teaching.
Mel, thank you so much for that free offer and just for being here today. This is such an important topic for caregivers because they are doing the outside work, which is great, but they're not doing the inner work, which they really need to do so that they could have a better mental health and better focus on their loved ones. So thank you so much, Mel. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Caregiver Cast today. Get a community of support, resources, and strategies for your caregiving journey inside the Caregiver Lifeline community. Visit caregiverlifelinecommunity.com. Get involved with the show. Send your email to mpetrucci2002@gmail.com. And we'll see you again next week for another episode of Caregiver Cast.